Catholic Moments, Episode 104, Halo Day.
Blooming, finding joy in the journey and hope in the heaven yet to come. Blooming.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Moments. And now, here's your host and my mom, Lisa Hendy.
Thanks, Eric, and welcome everyone to another episode of Catholic Moments, the show from CatholicMom.com, where we talk about all things faith, family, and fun from a Catholic perspective. And I want to welcome you. I'm a little tardy this week with the show, and I apologize for that as we release it on a Thursday this week. It's been a tremendously busy week around my house, actually a tremendously busy few weeks. You know that my mother is here visiting, so I've been trying to spend as much time as I can with her. And this weekend we had a special celebration. Adam, my 14-year-old, graduated from 8th grade, so we celebrated that, as well as my husband and I celebrating our 23rd wedding anniversary. So that was a super fun weekend. And yesterday, my mom and I headed down to Seal Beach to visit my favorite pastor, Monsignor Michael Collins, who many of you know from a previous episode where we interviewed Monsignor Collins, also known as Father Collins in my heart, about his spirituality and what a wonderful priest he is. So I got to go down and visit him for the day yesterday and walk on the beach a little bit and enjoy that day. So this podcast is going to be chock full of news and information as usual. Need to warn you up front again that we've got a long episode this week. We actually are featuring 3 very special interviews this week from authors who publish with Halo Publishing, which is the wonderful publishing company from my good friend Lisa Umina, and she was a previous guest on the show as well. Each of these 3 interviews features women who have written incredible children's books, and I know you're absolutely going to love hearing about the stories behind these books. They're true stories of bravery and inspiration, and I know that you'll love each of these interviews. And we've got our Deacon moment from Deacon Tom this week, as well as another Mary moment from my great friend Sarah Reinhardt, your feedback, some contest news and information, and much, much more. So let's kick off the show this week with our favorite online deacon, Deacon Tom Fox.
Hello, dear friends of Catholic Moments. If you haven't been to my website and looked at the pictures there, perhaps you could do so, or look at the picture used on last week's Catholic Moments podcast. You'll see a picture there of a couple that I had just married about 30 minutes before the picture was taken. In this scene, it shows Deacon Tom signing the marriage license. My wife and I had been the Catholic mentor couple to help prepare this couple for marriage. And during the actual liturgy in my homily, I said to Matt, the groom, that if God ever gifted me with one more son, I couldn't ask for a better gift than that the son would be like Matt. And about his wife, Melissa, her name is Lissa, one of God's works of beauty and charm and sweetness, I may have said something about wanting to grow up next door to a girl named Lissa. Now briefly, let me tell you how this marriage came to be. Matt and Lissa were part of a group of a dozen or more young people that hung out in Denver. This group did everything: skiing, travel, meals, visits to Rocky Mountain National Park. Someone in this group would get an idea, start calling others, and pretty soon something was planned with several of these friends getting together. And this went on for perhaps 8 or 10 years. Well, one day Matt called Lissa and asked about going out for a meal together. It sounded fine with Lissa, and she said something like, "Did you call the others? Who's coming with us?" Matt responded, no, he hadn't called anyone else. Lissa persisted, "Do you want me to call anyone and see who can go?" Matt didn't respond, and there was a silence. And after this pondering pause, Lissa said, "Well, do you mean like you and me going out, like on a date?" And probably with a lump in his throat, Matt said, "Yes, if you'd like to." And that's how their relationship began. Now, there's much more about how friends knew that they should have been together a long time before this. My first deacon moment in June is about first love and marriage. Most of us who are married know of a time when love first started to bloom in our hearts and minds. Sort of like the wind which blows where it wills. A week before, we may not have known this could be love with this person. And then for us who believe, the Spirit, the same Spirit as of Pentecost, comes upon a man and woman and starts a spark that can become a blazing love. Today, whether you're married a week or a year or a decade or more, pause for a deacon moment and let your heart smile again at the gift of new love that you once experienced. God, our Creator, knew what He was doing when He started us off with this kind of love. It may turn into something else later. We'll talk about that in a subsequent deacon moment. But for now, just for today, let your heart smile as you thank God for the gift of man and woman. Thank God for that joy you experienced, like Adam, when he spoke to God about Eve. At last, this one is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. He meant this person has become a part of me, and we're meant to be together forever. Next week, we'll continue on God's plan about marriage. For now, I pray for you to have love, fresh or revitalized love. This is Deacon Tom. Blessings.
Deacon Tom, I'm so happy that we're going to be doing this series on marriage during the month of June. As I mentioned, Greg and I just celebrated our wedding anniversary, and it's always a time of the year that I really give thanks to God for my own marriage, and so I'm really happy to be able to listen to your reflections this month and to enjoy the good words that you have on the married life and our vocation to marriage. And I want to let all of you listening know that Deacon Tom has some treats in store for us this month. Starting next week, you'll be able to download a reference that he's putting together for us on marriage, on the sacrament of marriage, some great links and book references and other things. So be on the lookout next week for that. Wherever you listen to this podcast, you'll be able to download that as well. And in addition, he is graciously sponsoring a wonderful contest this month. And this is to win one of 4 different books that he's offering on the topic of marriage. Let me go look up those book titles real quick, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, this news is just so hot off the press about this contest, but I wanted to get it into this week's podcast, so thank you for bearing with me while I switch back and forth between recording and in my browser. The 4 books that you have a chance to win, here they are. Number 1, Good Marriages Don't Just Happen, and this is from Thomas More Press. The second book is entitled Fighting for Your Marriage, and it's from Josie Bass Publishers. The book number 3, Good News About Sex and Marriage, and this is autographed by Christopher West and comes from Servant Publications. And the final book is entitled Marriage, How to Live Together and Like It, from Deacon Louis Barbado from our Barbado Book Publishers. So to win this week's contest, it's a little bit different. What you need to do during the month of June is go over to any of the Catholic Moments podcast posts over at sqpn.com and enter a comment with your name and using a valid email address anytime during the month of June. A comment on any of the Catholic Moments posts will enter you in the drawing to win one of these 4 books, and 4 lucky winners will be drawn at the end of the month of June 2009. So be sure to enter yourself and put your name in there to the hat. And I think what I'm going to do is tell you that you can enter each week on the podcast. So if you want to try to put your name in on a comment, one comment per podcast from each of you, but if you want to enter in multiple weeks, that will give you more of a chance to win. And so be sure to head over to sqpn.com to enter this, and it's a little bit of a special thing that we're doing to help you become more familiar with the great programming that's going on over to sqpn.com, and we'd love your comments over there to enter this contest. So be sure to do that, and thanks again to my favorite online deacon. It's Deacon Tom Fox, and you can visit Deacon Tom anytime at www.deacontomonline.com. And now, speaking of friends, here's a great promo from one of my favorite new podcasts called In Between Sundays. And here are the Padley brothers.
Ah, that is so good. That is probably the best root beer float from Sonic I have ever had. I can't believe they would give these away for free.
Pat, why would you of all people be deserving of a free root beer float? I mean, seriously.
Nick, isn't it obvious they're celebrating our new podcast In Between Sundays? All the listeners, go ahead and thank me. I just set this little thing up with Sonic, so it's all good.
That's obviously not true, and I don't think they should be thanking you for free root beer floats from Sonic.
But they can thank us for a new podcast, In Between Sundays. Hi, I'm Pat.
And I'm Nick.
And we're from In Between Sundays, a new podcast for young adults.
This podcast was created to help young adults grow in their faith and to help them learn more about carrying on what we learn each hour on Sunday.
And you guys can find us online at inbetweensundays.com. We also got a Facebook group, search for us on iTunes, that kind of stuff.
We want to be your podcast for the other 6 days of the week.
And, while you're at it, just go ahead and get a free root beer float. I mean, it's on Wednesday, so if you're listening to this on Wednesday, just go ahead and get a free root beer float.
Patrick, the deal's going to be over by then.
Well, get a root beer float anyway. Just Nick will pay for them for you.
What?
You can tell by the sound of this promo, Nick and Pat are just such great guys. I met them last year at the Catholic New Media Celebration in Atlanta, and I had such a great time hanging out with these guys. And when you listen to the podcast, you'll see why I fell so in love with both of them. It's a terrific new show, and whether you're a young adult or maybe an even older adult like me, I know you're going to enjoy it. Head over to inbetweensundays.com and subscribe to this great new show from the Padleys. And Nick and Pat, I look forward to being with you guys in San Antonio at the end of the month for this month's Catholic New Media Celebration. And if you want to find out more about that event, it's being held on June 27th in San Antonio, Texas. You're going to be hearing from a lot of your favorite bloggers and podcasters and folks just active in consuming and enjoying Catholic New Media. You can find out more about it at celebration.sqpn.com, and I hope you'll join me and many of the other SQPN podcasters who will be there. Deacon Tom will be there as well, and I know you guys are going to have a great time. So if you are planning to attend, drop me an email or a note on Facebook because I'd love to hear from you. And speaking of Facebook, we've got some feedback this week from two of our friends. And the first is a new friend of mine, Jeannie, on Facebook. And she says, "Hi, Lisa. I look forward to listening to your latest Catholic Moments podcast as my husband, Eddie, is in the discernment process for formation in the permanent diaconate. I really enjoyed the Kristen Armstrong episode, and thank you for your ministry. And thank you, Jeannie, for being my friend on Facebook. You can find me through the links at the show notes. Wherever you listen to this podcast, I'd love to hook up with you on Facebook and connect over there. And Jeannie, I want you to know that I'm praying for you and Eddie as you discern your family's possible vocation to the permanent diaconate. And we are also so happy to hear from our friend Mark over at CatholicMom.com, who left the following comment. He says, "Lisa, thank you so much for this podcast." And he's referring to last week's podcast episode number 103, A Conversation with the Deacons. "It was as if the three of you were speaking for my benefit. It was the final sign of many over the years that I am being called to apply to the deacon program in my diocese. I contacted the diaconate office yesterday after hearing the podcast, and I will be receiving my invitation to attend the first formation information meeting later this summer. Blessings to all of you for the work you do and the blessings the Spirit bestows through your ministry." And that's from my friend Mark. And that's so touching. I just really get almost choked up reading this comment because it really means a lot to me that conversation that we had last week would be inspirational to people who are in the very process of discerning that vocation. And boy, you can't get better role models than Deacon Chuck or Deacon Tom for what it really is like to live out your life of faith through the life of being a permanent deacon. So thanks again to both of them, and to Mark and to Jeannie for your comments. I'd love to hear from you anytime. You can leave feedback at the places where you listen to this show in the blogs there. You can also drop me an email anytime to Lisa at CatholicMom.com, or my favorite, call our voice feedback line at 206-339-9272. And if you didn't catch that phone number, you can find it at CatholicMoments.com. And next up, let's hear from my good friend Sarah and her wonderful daughter Elizabeth with this week's Mary Moment.
Hello, my name's Elizabeth.
And my name's Sarah Reinhardt.
It's time for Mary Moment.
Last week, I mentioned Pope Paul VI's beautiful Marian apostolic exhortation, Marialis Cultus. This week, I wanted to share some more of the wonderful inspiration I took from what Paul VI had to say about how Mary, the Mother of God, applies to us modern women. The following excerpt is from paragraph 37. Our own time, no less than former times, is called upon to verify its knowledge of reality with the Word of God, and, keeping to the matter at present under consideration, to compare its anthropological ideas and the problems springing therefrom with the figure of the Virgin Mary as presented by the Gospel. The reading of the divine scriptures, carried out under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and with the discoveries of the human sciences and the different situations in the world today being taken into account, will help us to see how Mary can be considered a mirror of the expectations of the men and women of our time. Thus, the modern woman, anxious to participate with the decision-making power in the affairs of the community, will contemplate with intimate joy Mary, who, taken into dialogue with God, gives her active and responsible consent, not to the solution of a contingent problem, but to that event of world importance, as the incarnation of the Word has been rightly called. The modern woman will appreciate that Mary's choice of the state of virginity, which in God's plan prepared her for the mystery of the incarnation, was not a rejection of any of the values of the married state, but a courageous choice which she made in order to consecrate herself totally to the love of God. The modern woman will note with pleasant surprise that Mary of Nazareth, while completely devoted to the will of God, was far from being a timidly submissive woman or one whose piety was repellent to others. On the contrary, she was a woman who did not hesitate to proclaim that God vindicates the humble and the oppressed and removes the powerful people of this world from their privileged positions. Cross-reference Luke 1:51 through 53. The modern woman will recognize in Mary, who stands out among the poor and humble of the Lord, a woman of strength, who experienced poverty and suffering, flight and exile. Cross-reference Matthew 2:13 through 23. Reading that section of Marialis Cultus, I couldn't help but ask myself, why do I always think that I have to come up with all the answers on my own? Why do I always think that I'm the one in charge, the one in control? There was Mary, a consecrated virgin, just minding her own business, doing what needed to be done. Can you imagine what she must have felt when the angel showed up? I'm sure it was joy first. I'm sure her first response wasn't, hey, listen, God, could you come back in a day or two? I've got some laundry, some dishes. Yeah, you get the point, and you can probably imagine how my conversations with God often go. I hope these passages I've shared over the last 2 weeks have convinced you in some way to pick up Marialis Cultus. Maybe you've read it in the past, but I think it's a gem that can be read and reread and then read again. It's been here all along, the whole time I've been Catholic. It was written by Pope Paul VI in 1974, and I found it almost by accident, except I have a feeling that finding it was a little divinely inspired. We'll have a link to the full apostolic exhortation in the show notes, and I highly recommend it in case you didn't catch that from the rest of what I've said. Until next week, my friends, may Mary hold you close and lead you ever closer to her Son.
As always, thank you so much, Sarah, for your reflection. And we'll have links in our show notes to the documents mentioned by Sarah in her reflection. And I look forward to this part of the show every week. I'm really enjoying learning more about our Mother Mary with you, Sarah. So thank you so much for your contribution. And next up, we're going to move into the interview portion of the podcast, and this is actually this week 3 separate interviews. The common denominator between these 3 interviews is that all of the authors have published their work through Halo Publishing, which is the publishing house of my good friend Lisa Umina. And you'll note when you listen to these that these are sort of just your everyday Catholic women who decided to take it upon themselves to write these wonderful stories of hope and inspiration, and I hope that you enjoy listening to them. The first interview is with Leona Ashley, and it's about her book, I Am a Viver. You'll learn a little bit more about what a viver is. The next up, we'll hear from Crista Stewart, who is the author of a book entitled The Little Frog. And finally, we have an interview with a Catholic school principal and a Catholic school teacher, Tina Schneider and Anna Discenzo, and their book, Remembering D, which documents the life of a very special young man who attended the Catholic school where both of them serve. And I know that you're going to be really touched by each of these interviews, so I hope you can stay tuned with us or break up your listening into a few different segments. And at the end of the podcast, I'll just join you again real briefly to sign off and say our prayer. But now we're going to go back to back with these 3 interviews. Our next guest today on Catholic Moments is a Catholic wife and mom of 4 adorable daughters, Leona Ashley. How are you today, Leona?
Great.
Great. I'm so happy to have you here today to discuss your the book that you've just recently released, I Am a Viver. And before we head into discussing the book, what I'd like to have you do is just briefly tell us a little bit more about yourself and your family.
Okay. You said I'm the mother of 4, and we live in Ludington, Michigan. We also have exchange students. We've been getting them for the last couple of years. And my husband is a golf pro. And I'm a teacher. I just don't work, and because of having 4 kids. And in the meantime, I decided to write a book about my daughter Abigail, who was born 4 years ago with a rare tumor on her arm called an infantile fibrosarcoma. And because of her tumor, she had to have her arm and her shoulder amputated at 10 days old. And I thought that there needed to be a book written about that.
You know, let's backtrack a couple minutes first. I have to correct you when you say you don't work, because I know you do work. And a lot of our listeners out there are moms who work just like you do at home, very busy. So you're sort of temporarily retired from the job of teaching in the classroom.
That's
right. But I can't let that one pass without commenting on it, because I know you work, Leona. And is Abigail your youngest daughter?
Nope, she's our 3rd.
Okay.
We have Elena, who is going to be 8 in July, Hannah, who's 6, Abigail's 4, she'll be 5 in July, and then we have Grace, who's 3.
Did you have any sense before Abigail was born that she was going to have this condition that she was born with?
Nothing. We had an ultrasound at 18 weeks, and it was perfectly fine, very normal. We had a scheduled C-section. I was measuring 10 weeks ahead of schedule. And when we went in, the doctor decided she was going to do another ultrasound. But before that ultrasound could happen, I went into labor, and she was born. And I just remember laying on the table for the C-section, and the doctor saying, "Oh, there's something wrong with her arm. There's something on it." And I was just thinking something like a birthmark, the size of a quarter. And I looked over, and there she was sitting on the little table with this huge bump on her arm.
When you say huge, can you give us a description? Because, everybody picture the size of a baby's arm.
We just tell people it was the size of her head, of her little baby head.
Wow. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, or a baseball. It was big.
So then immediate decisions needed to be made, right, about how they were going to treat this.
Well, they took her from the DeVos Children's Hospital in Grand Rapids via ambulance over to the University of Michigan, and I stayed at Grand Rapids for 2 days, and then they released me, and we went over there, and it took about 8 days before they determined what it was. They went to the tumor board. They got all together and decided that it was this infantile fibrosarcoma, and she was one in several millions. And they hadn't seen anything like it except maybe one case over in Maryland, and that she needed to have her arm and shoulder amputated.
Which, I'm sure that was horrifying at the time, but in terms of the thought of, that she could recover from that, that was probably a fairly easy decision, to go ahead and pursue their advice about the treatment. Now, she's grown up. She's almost 5, like you said. And tell us what prompted you to write the book, I Am a Viver.
Well, when we were at the University of Michigan, we were staying at the Ronald McDonald House, and we had a 3-year-old and a 19-month-old. And, how do you explain to them that you're not bringing a baby sister home after they've been told the last 9 months that, we're going to have a baby, and then the baby comes and the baby has to go to the hospital, and who knows what's going to happen to it. There were no books out there. I can think of one book in particular about a kid who had cancer, but other than that, I can't think of any others. And then the limb difference books, there's one by Libby Chila, Imagine Amazing Me.
Yes.
And other than that, there's not, The Little Frog just came out this year by Crista Stewart. But besides that, I don't know very many books about children with limb differences.
And the term limb difference pertains to kids who have lost a limb for any reason, right?
Right, yes.
Okay, great. I've never heard that particular term before, so you introduced something new into my vocabulary today, and thanks for helping me be more sensitive about that.
That's what they call it at Mary's Free Bed in Grand Rapids. It's one of the largest hospitals for amputees, and that's how they refer to it, the Center for Limb Differences.
That's amazing. So Abigail is, in every sense of the word, a very busy and active little 4-year-old, right?
Oh, yes. Very much indeed.
And
she climbs trees, she golfs, part of the book, and that's part of what the book is. She puts Pez candy in her Pez dispenser. She gets mad when I take the tops off of her pudding in her yogurt, things that are just normal kid things. She does everything.
So, did she grow up with a sensitivity about this herself being a little bit different, or do you think she just sees this as the way she was born and how God created her?
I think that's how she sees it. The only time we've ever had people of course look. Sometimes people will talk to each other and stare. Look at the little girl's one arm. The only time we've ever had an incident that was just horrific was we were at McDonald's one day, and a little girl who was probably about 8 or 9 saw her and just carried on and on about how disgusting it was to see a little kid with one arm, and her dad just looked at me and I looked at him and we exchanged a few words, and yeah.
An 8 or 9-year-old, my goodness, you would think by that age they'd be a little more sensitive.
That's what I figured. She was old enough to know better.
Yeah, that's crazy. So what does Abigail think about her book?
Oh, she thinks she's cool. She just thinks it's just the most neatest thing in the world. Her sisters want to know when I'm going to write books about them, though.
And the book, can you describe sort of what it looks like for our listeners who maybe haven't had a chance to read it yet, what they can expect to see with the book?
Yep, it's called I Am a Viver, and it's about a little girl, Abigail, who had cancer. And she starts off, it's told from her perspective, and she's here to explain what cancer is. It goes into a description of just a childlike description of what cancer is, and then all of the things that are interesting, or as the book says, cool about having one arm. Like one of the things that she says is cool is when she sits down to dinner, we always hang on to hands and say a prayer. And she thinks that it's so funny that her sisters have to hang on to her foot. Yeah. And just things like when people think that her shirt sleeve is tucked in, because there's nothing there, no stub, nothing. She has no shoulder. So we tuck her sleeve in, and people think that her arm is stuck in her shirt, and sometimes they offer to help her, and there's nothing there, and they get embarrassed, and we just snicker about it and laugh.
Well, it sounds like that Abigail was born into the perfect family for her, because it sounds like you guys have very graciously, probably with the backdrop of your faith foundation, been able to accept her as a gift from God and
Oh,
her
definitely.
own unique way. So I want to share. I want to thank you for sharing her story, and I want to let our readers know that we'll have links in our show notes to this wonderful book, I Am a Viver. And again, our guest today has been Leona Ashley. And Leona, I want you to keep in touch with me because I'm sure you'll have future books coming out since you have 3 other daughters to write about. So I want to wish you all the best, and please thank Abigail for sharing her story and for inspiring us all so much.
Thank you.
Next up on today's episode of Catholic Moments, I'm really happy to welcome my guest. She's a mother of 4 from McMurray, Pennsylvania, and the author of a great new book entitled The Little Frog. Our guest today is Crista Stewart. How are you today, Crista?
Good. How are you?
I'm terrific. I'm really happy to help spread the good news about this very special book that you've written. But before we discuss the book, I'd like for you just to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your family.
Sure. I'm a wife and mother of 4 children, 3 girls and a boy, and we live in McMurray, Pennsylvania, and I'm a stay-at-home mom, and now I'm working on writing books.
So let's talk about that. How do you transition from being a stay-at-home mom to an author? What was the impetus for this particular book?
How did I get started in writing it?
Yes.
Well, I was last summer. I was on a kick with my kids. They were on a kick with me about me, instead of reading stories, about telling them stories. So all summer long, I spent telling them stories, and they kept saying, "That's a good one." So I started writing them down. And in the early fall, in the beginning of September, I was teaching a Sunday school class, and a gentleman was teaching along with me, and he was talking to the children on the side before we were teaching our lesson about how God created frogs and how frog is spelled F-R-O-G, and that frog stands for fully rely on God. And I thought, wow, that is such a neat concept. And I thought, I'll never look at a frog the same way. And so I went home, all day. I kept thinking, I felt God was kind of calling in my heart that there should be a story about, a little frog that may be born different, and that he learns to fully rely on God. And so that evening, I actually typed it out, and then I read it to my kids the next day and my husband, and they're like, "That one, you should try to get that one published." And then it just started the ball rolling. So
did your co-Sunday school teacher get a credit in the book, or?
You know what? I only met him in teaching that. It was just kind of, I think, a God thing how it all even happened, because I had signed up, and so had this gentleman, to teach Sunday school, and they had him in the wrong class.
Oh my gosh.
And he was supposed to be in the next class, but they had no one to fill our spots. And I had told them a week or 2 weeks prior I wanted to switch my volunteer work to, we have a Wednesday night church group thing, and I wanted to switch to volunteering in my son's class. But I didn't want to leave them hanging until they found somebody. So it ironically just happened that the gentleman and I, and that's why I don't think it was by chance. I do think that God wanted me to hear that. And so it just was, I don't even know what his last name is.
Oh, how funny.
And so, I did not give him the credit for it. But.
So with the story, how did it evolve at all from when you very first wrote it? Did it was it changed in editing process at all, or is it pretty much the story that you wrote that night?
It's a lot, the story. However, I'm, like I said, I was a school teacher prior to being a mother, but for the past 9 years I've been a mom, raising my children, and how this came all about. I obviously had no idea about the publishing process.
Right.
And so I thought my first copy was great. You know what I mean? And then when Halo Publishing, they were wonderful. They suggested going through the editing process, and the first editing process was more kind of grammatical type things, and then it went through a second phase after I fixed that. Lisa had a woman look at it, and she had given a suggestion I had originally had the little frog, when he meets this boy Chase in the book, living in Chase's house in a little, in his bedroom, and this woman had suggested, for people that are animal activists, that they might read that and think, well, you shouldn't take an animal out of its natural habitat. So had suggested the pond in Chase's backyard. And so that was a dynamic that changed. And then when I changed that dynamic, it changed. Then it went through a third time, and I was given the idea of, why don't the idea of the little frog bringing friends into Chase's life, because Chase has a missing arm, and the children were having a hard time relating to him because of his missing arm. So it kind of, I brought in that dynamic. So yes, the editing process, I think, made the book a lot better, and helped bring other facets to the book that I didn't originally have.
I think it really underscores what you've just described, the fact that so many people look at children's books and think, hey, I could do this. I could write a children's book, no problem. And I think in many respects that telling a story in such a short form and getting your message across can be even more difficult than writing a novel. You have to be much more effective with the language that you're using. So.
Well, I'll tell you, after writing this, I look at every book out there that's more than 30-some pages. I'm like, how do they do that? And I definitely thought it was a lot more work than I ever imagined, but it's been extremely fulfilling. So
well, talking about it being fulfilling, I want to hear some of the responses that you've had from families and children who you've read the book to or that you've shared the book with.
Well, I can actually, parents, they're friends of ours, but they're also parents with 3 boys who are on the autism spectrum. I have a quote, it's in the back of the book. It says, they had said, the story teaches you that being different is okay, and when you meet someone who is different than you, we should embrace them instead of ridicule them, and that they said that the little frog is such a gift to their family and to everyone who will read it, and it's truly inspirational. So that was a quote from friends of mine, Sean and Adina Riley, and everybody. It's been a very not surprising, because I thought that the book was good, but the children just love it, and they love this little frog, and I have about, I think, like 700 books that have already been sold, and a lot from within my community, and everyone has really great responses that they read it their kids want to read it every night. So,
well, that's so special, and it's such to be a mom and to know the gift that literature is in your child's life, and stories like that you've shared with them, and then to be able to know that you've created something yourself that will touch not only your children but other children with a message that's so important. And I hope that you're encouraged to continue on in your writing career, and that we'll be hearing from you again in the future. Do you look at the world now with eyes that look for stories?
Oh yeah, and I obviously read to my children a lot, and being a school teacher, I read a lot, but I don't think I thought about all that it takes to make a book good. And now, we go to the library all the time now, and look for books, and I'm like just really intrigued with it all. So yeah.
Well, it's a real treat to have spoken with you today, Crista. And Crista's website, you can find this book, and we'll have the website's a little bit long. It's CristaStewart'sLittleFrog.com. And in the show notes, wherever you listen to Catholic Moments, we'll have links not only to Crista's website, but also to the places where you can purchase The Little Frog. And it's a wonderful new book from Halo Publishing. And again, our guest has been Crista Stewart. Crista, are there any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners before we let you get back to your family?
No, just go buy the book, and I hope it helps make a difference in your family's life.
Well, those are important words, and I would encourage everybody to check it out. It's a wonderful book, The Little Frog by Crista Stewart. And Crista, thanks again for your time, and good luck with whatever lies ahead in your writing career.
Thank you.
Our final guests on today's episode of Catholic Moments have come together to create an absolutely wonderful book that I can't wait to share with you. My guests in this segment are Tina Schneider and Anna Discenzo. Tina is the principal of a wonderful school called the Montessori School at Holy Rosary, and Anna is the upper elementary teacher at that school. How are both of you today?
Fine, thank you.
Very well, thanks.
Good. Let me ask both of you, and we'll start off with, we'll let the principal go first. If you could just briefly introduce yourselves and let us know a little bit more about you and your work.
I am Tina Schneider. I am the principal, the director of the Montessori School at Holy Rosary. And this is a school that is in its 14th year as a Catholic Montessori school. And we have grown over the years and are proud to have now preschool through middle school. And my work in the office started only a few years ago, but I was in the classroom as a preschool teacher prior to that for 10 years.
And I don't think I heard where Holy Rosary is located.
We are located in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay. And how about you, Anna? Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
My name's Anna Discenzo. I'm in my 11th year as an elementary teacher here in Cleveland. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, but left at the opportunity after Montessori training to come and work in Cleveland's Little Italy to serve this community.
Well, it really does sound like a wonderful community, and that was one of the things that I got caught up in reading this book. The book, again, is entitled Remembering Dee, and I'd like for Anna, for you just to tell us a little bit more about this story, the story of Demetrius Smith, and how the book came about.
Okay. Demetrius Smith was a child in my classroom for 3 years, but he was a child of the school for 9. And so Tina and I both have known him since he was 3 years old. And during that time, Demetrius was amazing. He was a loving, generous little boy who was like the mayor of the school. He would walk through the halls, greet everyone with a handshake and a huge smile. He just had the most amazing light about him. And when he was 5, he was diagnosed with a tumor on his spinal cord, which was actually the second time he had cancer. The first was when he was 2.5. He had the surgery. It was successful. He rejoined us in his first grade year and proceeded through the elementary program. When he was in 5th grade, he went to the doctor. They thought he had pink eye, and it turned out that a tumor had started to grow on his brainstem, and it was impacting his optic nerve, and that was what was causing his eye to be tearing. So they had surgery, he had radiation and chemotherapy, and he came back to us at the beginning of his 6th grade year. And he started off by going to camp with his dad and the class, and loved it, loved being out in the woods with nature and his friends. And then unfortunately, February 2008, the tumor came back, and he graduated with his class April 4th, 2008, and he passed away May 29th, 2008. So we're coming up on a year of being without him.
And it's an amazing story and told through the book. And I'd like to ask you, Tina, just to let us know a little bit more about sort of how the tribute to Demetrius through the form of this book, how this came together, and how the kids have been involved in the process as well.
Right. We have a connection with Lisa Umina at Halo Publishing through a presentation that she had done with us with her own books a little while back. And after Demetrius passed away, we felt as a community there needed to be a way to remember him, because as Anna said, he was a very special child and just showed us so much and taught us so much in his time with us regarding just having a positive attitude and to his perseverance through his illness and through his treatments and all of that, that he gave us so much that we wanted to be able to give back a little bit to the community through him. And so I was in touch with Lisa at Halo Publishing, and she helped us kind of formulate the steps of how to go about making this happen. And the class got involved with trying to figure out the best parts to include in the book. And they came up with what the characteristics of Demetrius were that made him so special, and which ones to highlight in the book through their illustrations and through the photographs that were chosen. So, by putting that all together, the hope is that we're able to share with others the beautiful life that he shared with us, and giving others hope and inspiration if they find themselves in a similar circumstance.
Anna, was it difficult for the kids at times to? I'm sure they're still grieving his loss. Was it difficult for them to be part of this process, or do you think it actually helped in their healing?
I think it was both. I think it helped with their healing in that they were able to focus on sharing him with others, and they were able to sort of step outside of their grief and kind of be hyper-focused on, okay, we've got to meet this deadline for the book. And through that process, they were able to celebrate his life. And so we went from being a really, really sad community to being almost joyful in being able to celebrate his life. When it came time to write the book, the children filled the chalkboard with brainstorming of all of his remarkable characteristics. And if they had had their way, it would have been probably double the size of the book that we ended up putting out. It was very cathartic and very healing for all of us to realize that while he physically was no longer with us, his spirit and his inspiration permeated the entire community.
That's one of the aspects of your school, Tina, that I really was touched by in reading Demetrius's story. It sounds like your students have a lot of involvement in your community, and even with a neighborhood facility for elders, it sounds like, as well. Talk a little bit about some of the philanthropic work that's being done by the Montessori students.
Yes, the students at the Montessori school do get very involved in the community and in reaching out to others and finding ways that they can have a voice even at their young ages. So they do come up with ideas. Some of them we can implement, some of them we cannot. But they're always actively seeking ways to become involved. They've been involved in raising funds for St. Jude's over the past 11 years, and got involved in that as a result of knowing Demetrius and the struggles that he was going through his childhood. They've been involved with Abington Arms, which is a residence for elderly and handicapped members of the Cleveland area. So they often go to Abington Arms and get involved with holiday projects and just socializing with them. And that intergenerational involvement is very important to them as well. And the elderly get a lot out of it, but so do our students.
Oh, so I can imagine. Well, I want to thank both of you for taking the time to share this wonderful book with us. Again, the name of the book is Remembering Dee, and we'll have links in our show notes for you to be able to go and learn more about Demetrius Smith and also how you can order this book. And in case you're interested in learning more about the Montessori School at Holy Rosary, we'll have links to that as well. Are there any closing thoughts, Tina, that you'd like to share with our listeners before we let you get back to your work?
Well, I would just like to say that I hope that if you have an opportunity to read the book, that you will find it very inspirational and get from it the great joy that we had in knowing Demetrius and how he shared his life with us, because it was such a special child that we wanted the world to know about him, and hopefully that will spread throughout the greater community.
Well, I'll be doing my best to help spread the word. I was very inspired by the story and by the way that you all have captured his memory, and I'm sure the support for his family has been wonderful also. Anna, any closing thoughts on your end before we let you get back to those kids in the classroom?
I would just say that if you have the opportunity to be caring for a child, whether it's your own child or a niece or a nephew or neighbor, relative, whomever, that you just be really patient with them, give them lots of hugs and kisses, and just cherish every single moment you can spend with them, because every minute with a child is precious, even when they're driving you crazy at the end.
Not that they ever do, huh, when you're a teacher. Well, I want to thank both of you for the wonderful book and also for the work that you're doing informing those children there. And I hope to meet you and your students someday in person. In the meantime, I'll be praying for you and your mission and remembering Demetrius and his family in my prayers as well. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks again for sticking with us on this very extended episode of the Catholic Moments podcast. I hope you enjoyed those interviews and that you'll visit the links in the show notes that we have for purchase information on all three of those books, as well as the very inspirational website about Demetrius and the wonderful life that he lived that's memorialized through his classmates' book. And I want to thank again publisher Halo Publishing and Lisa Umina for bringing these authors to my attention. It's so fun to be able to help spread the word about terrific projects like these that are so wonderful for our families. So thanks again to Lisa and to all the authors that we spoke with today on Halo Day here at Catholic Moments. And I do want to give a shout out about our current contest going on this week over at CatholicMom.com. We have your chance to win a beautiful doll. If you've got a special little girl in your life, a new friend of CatholicMom.com, Christy, is offering one of her Friends Forever Girls dolls, and you can have your chance to win that. I'll put a link in the show notes for your chance to head over and win one of those dolls. If you're interested in things like American Girl dolls, you might want to check out the Friends Forever Girls. Wonderful, very age-appropriate dolls for little girls, and you have a chance to win one. So check that out. And as we close out this week's show, I'd like to ask you to join me in a prayer to live in union with the Trinity as we anticipate Trinity Sunday this weekend and celebrating that together. And I just ask you to join me in keeping in mind all of the intentions of our Catholic Moments and SQPN family of friends and our community that we've built online. If there are those out there who are seeking our prayer intercessions, please know that we're praying for each of you today, and that we love you and we support you in what you're doing. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Omnipotence of the Father, help my weakness and save me from the depths of misery. Wisdom of the Son, direct all my thoughts, words, and deeds. Love of the Holy Spirit, be the source of all the activity of my mind, that it may be conformed to thy divine will. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, until next week, everybody, be sure to enter our contest, both the Friends Forever Girls contest as well as the wonderful Catholic Marriage Book Contest being sponsored by Deacon Tom Fox. And remember, for that one, you need to go over to sqpn.com and leave a comment, and that'll be your chance to win. And until next week, I hope to hear from you by email, lisa@catholicmom.com. Be my friend on Facebook or follow me on Twitter, and call our voice feedback line, 206-339-9272. Until next week, have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.
SQPN, leading the way in Catholic new media.